applied a bioeconomic model that basically looks at, you set scenarios of fisheries management, whether the fisheries management is conservative or MSY or really crappy management, and then it basically makes then the trade-offs of this system of where there's going to be both, potential impacts but also benefits of the reserve systems. So at least in California, that's how they've attempted to do that. In any of the work that we've done, we only look at impacts, and it's really the worst potential impact. We don't make any assumptions that the fishing fleet is able to relocate or receive any benefits from, spillover or whatever. But the other model that the folks in Santa Barbara are working on attempts to address that, because they do have a fleet dynamic piece of their model. And as far as eco, space, and sim, I'm not that familiar with, so I'm sure there's others here that probably are.
My name is Miranda. I'm a marine biological consultant in Nanaimo with MC Wright & Associates. I just have a question with regards to Marxan and the different applications. We do deal a lot with subtidal habitat destruction, and I'm just thinking through the process. And by creating a marine protected area, you're essentially saying to the commercial industry that for all intents and purposes, those fish or prawns or whatever don't exist. So I'm thinking that if we're dealing with, say, a severely impacted habitat where everything's been obliterated, would it be possible to use Marxan in the planning process of siting a facility to try and put a value on the economical impact to the fishing industry by allowing destruction of a certain area of habitat?
So are you saying, I mean, that's almost getting at like I may be wrong here, but like at the system, the ecosystem, or the like almost the ecosystem service type value, or
it's I think for us trying to understand, if we permit X amount of area of this kind of habitat, we have substrate data, species data, bathymetry data. We don't really fully understand, I don't think yet, the effects on other user groups. So I'm just wondering if Marxan might be able to help us with that.
I don't know what's going to tell you that. I think, it comes down to, for at least how I would think about it, is you have to understand those. I think you'd have to understand what those conflicts are. Like what you're saying is, like, if maybe you don't want to treat it as you want to minimize the impact to the fishing industry that is impacting the ocean, right? And so, in our case, that's like, at least in California, is rockfish and urchin. They say, okay, those are either overfish or there's some sort of destruction that's happening, and so they don't allow those fisheries to occur in any of those zones. So they basically are the ones going to take the hardest hit, but maybe rightly so. And believe me, I'm a friend of everyone here, so I'm not trying to say that one should be in the other. But the initiative has basically said that, and so that's why those don't get cited into any of the zones. Does that kind of answer?
Sort of. It's sort of like, for example, a log dump. You're basically taking an area and you're blanketing the seafloor with wood waste. So again, if that was a commercial fishing ground, it's no longer resourceful. So is that sort of the same thing as, say, if you were to create a marine protected area, you can no longer fish to that? So I guess I'm just trying to see if Marxan would, if you kind of change the way you think about it, it would work in that application, just to understand more. But food for thought.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, okay. No, I haven't thought about that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
I was actually waiting till all the questions were done so that I could address your question about what's going to happen with the Marxan Best Practices handbook. I'm with PACMARA. PACMARA at this point is waiting for some reports that are coming out of the PNCIMA project to update the Marxan Best Practices handbook. On top of that, we are already in consultation with a bunch of the groups, including EcoTrust, to talk about putting together a Marxan with zones course here in British Columbia, and to repeat the workshop we had last year that you were at, which I think was really, really successful. We've had several people say what they'd like to have is a yearly event. So we're thinking of having the second annual planning zone workshop in May. So that's our little. It's coming down the pipe.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maya Paul. I work with the North Coast Is that better?
Hi.
I work with the North Coast Skeena First Nations Stewardship Society up in Prince Rupert. I'm the socioeconomic planner, so I try and think of this from the socioeconomic standpoint. And I know your organization is, I think what you started up your presentation saying it's the intention is to create a conservation-based economy, and I think one of the strongest points of having a conservation-based economy is to have local users fishing in local areas. And so I was wondering if within this MAR zone with zones, there's a way of applying or accommodating or accounting for the differences in values. Like, sure, you get a commercial market value of the harvest, but is there a way to enhance the locally fished local areas?
Yeah.
There is.
There is, and it's not so much like the tool is going to do it for you, it's the data that you have to represent it. And so how we go about doing, to address exactly what you're talking about, is that we capture local, like each local community has a map or a set of maps that represent what's valuable to them, and then those can then be normalized across all maps so that the most important area to your community is going to be the most is on the same scale as the most important value to the community next up. It's more of on the data side, and then how you feed that data into the tool to address that.
So then I guess the follow-up to that is, how do you then apply a relative weighting value between those?
Well, for us, I mean, it goes all the way back to how we capture the original data, and we use this, when we're mapping out the fishing grounds, we basically give each user or each fisherman 100 pennies to basically distribute throughout their fishing grounds for every single fishery. So that puts everything on the same scale to begin with. And then on the back end, we just use, we've done different weighting schemes, usually like what we call I don't know if it's the right term, but we call it internally as max normalization. So basically, if you had a map of use for one community that's got a range of values from, let's say, 0 to 100 or 1 million or whatever, and another community's map is like 0 to 500,000. You're just dividing by the max, and then there's some other math that our analysts work on. And so the most valuable cell or area in one community is going to be the same value relative to the other community, and then you feed both of those in, or all of those into whether it's here or any other sort of analysis or tool, and that basically gives equity across those fishing grounds.
Okay. That's great. I think I might have to talk to you a bit more.
Yeah. And that goes for anyone. If my contact information is there, feel free to call or email, and I'm more than happy to discuss anything.
Sounds good. I have one other question,
Sure.
And I think there were some people before that were getting at this, but I just wanted to get a bit more clarity. So, when you're looking at different uses, some of the uses are non-use, right? Non-use values, and there's a whole suite of non-market values that exist. I was wondering if there was any advice you could give on how to actually put that into a cost layer.
No, I have no advice. I just don't. It is a topic that is coming up in conversations more and more, and I think it's difficult. I think a lot of people are not even from this, but just like, how do you measure that stuff? And we have economists back in the EcoTrust that are thinking about these things, but even them, and to get them that's one area that there's so much research that hasn't been done. In order to, at least what they tell me, is that in order to do that type of research, you need a lot of money and a lot of time to figure that stuff out. Much more so, at least relative to the typical type of economic evaluations that we do, where it's usually just a cost benefit.